everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
So what we thought is that why don't we have these delivery robots focused towards areas where, they can be scaled across the country. And that's how we move towards airport deliveries, which is like, one set of deliveries which we're doing. Second is curbside deliveries, which can be scaled across the country. So that is out of the regulatory framework, and their adoption is not, intimidated by the regulatory frameworks, at least.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So today I'm joined by Ritukar Vijay, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ottonomy. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Scott. It's an honor to be on this show. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining, even though you have a seasonal cold. So just getting right into the interview itself, early in your career, you worked on autonomous driving software for unmanned battle tanks in India. That's quite interesting. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so I started my journey almost 14 years back. The first autonomous vehicles which I was working on was an autonomous battle tank for all the unmanned defense applications. And I was working for a company, and these were the defense projects where I was in charge of. And it was very interesting and very challenging. So we were the first ones to almost import Velodyne 64 3D LiDAR back in like 2010 in the Southeast Asia area. So that's so much closer to the DARPA age of autonomous driving, and things have evolved wonderfully well since then. So there's a lot of change in the industry, a lot of use cases using the similar technology, underlying technology, and here we are, talking about multiple applications of autonomous things, I'll say.
Now, I think in some of your other interviews, you talk about how back then LiDARs were as costly as $50,000 a piece, right?
Yeah, it was. Actually, it was $75,000, in back in 2010. And that was too much of money. But things have evolved. LiDARs have gone, cheaper. At the same time, they have gone in different form factors, and technology has evolved since then a lot more than we can imagine. Yeah.
Now, you've continued to then work at Aptiv and then BMW, and specifically at BMW, you worked on urban autopilot technology as well as warehouse automation. What was that like?
So, I after the unmanned, vehicles for defense, I had a stint for autonomous warehousing robots and also low-speed autonomous shuttles during my time in India itself. And then I moved to Germany, wherein I was working with a company called Aptiv. And therein I was in charge of BMW urban autopilots. And part of the team was also responsible for autonomous robotaxis, which were running in 2019. So it was, the ODD, which is like, the overall definition of the constraints which you put in on the, overall use case for urban autopilots are so much different than a typical highway autopilot or so that's the transition which the industry was having at that point in time. It was super exciting to be part of that journey.
Well, I think, for the listeners that are not as familiar, the thing about some of these urban mobility that you're referring to is oftentimes it has a kind of a fixed set of route. So, for example, maybe it goes from the parking lot to a particular recreational center, such as a shopping mall, for instance, but it is a kind of a fixed route. In the case of more of what we're seeing today, which is progression towards autonomous level 4 and 5, where we're talking about any passengers at this point, what was that epiphany when you realized that working on AV for passengers could take years, especially around regulatory as well as safety approval issues.
And that's kind of true in itself, and you said it right. Like autonomous cars still will take good amount of time to hit the mainstream, and even if the technology is ready, there will always be inhibitions from the regulatory aspect. That what do you call safe, right? So it is like almost 5 to 10 years down when it comes to massive adoption of autonomous cars. So at the same time, what we have seen is that the material movement is something which is very very required to run the economies because of the high adoption of digital economy, e-commerce. So even within that, warehouses are automated. Like a lot of warehouses are automated right now. But the core challenge is towards the main reason that people are not available for a lot many jobs, and labor shortage is something which is real. So it was that time when we realized that autonomous cars will take some time. So how can we use the know-how and the passion for autonomous things to focus on use cases which are current generation problems? And that's how we got into delivery.
Super. And this is a great transition to talk about your company, Autonomy. And one point that I just wanted to share is that whether it's India, whether it's Korea, whether it's the States, when we think about last mile delivery, and particularly more of delivery service applications where you have humans that's driving or biking to deliver foods and other goods, is that we've seen where these people are not only underpaid or undercompensated, but they're oftentimes overworked, and they're oftentimes also exposed to potential hazards and dangers on the road as well. How does autonomy work, and why is this different, and why is this so critical from a supply chain and last mile delivery?
So, if you look at one of the most important things which we had in our minds was that the target markets for for the autonomous systems right now will be North America and Europe, where unit economics does make sense for enterprises to automate things, right? And at the same time, it's not just to get a better ROI, but also to make the minimal staff which is present in the stores or restaurants to make their lives easier, right? So they focus on their core task, and part of their job is automated by these robots to help them. So, and within that space, we realized that there are three areas, not just the last mile bit, because that is something very, very exciting. At the same time, there is a lot of regulations which are around last mile. I'll just give you an example that almost right now in the United States, there are 20 states they have some sort of regulations around last mile delivery, and each state has a different set of regulations. Now this creates a very patchy framework altogether, and this will take some time to evolve. So what we thought is that why don't we have these delivery robots focused towards areas where they can be scaled across the country. And that's how we move towards airport deliveries, which is like one set of deliveries which we're doing. Second is curbside deliveries, which can be scaled across the country. So that is out of the regulatory framework, and their adoption is not intimidated by the regulatory frameworks, at least.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is incredibly important, and we've of course have had many different types of experts within this category, including other VCs that invest actively in this space. And part of the reason I think some of them have chosen to focus on off-road and, to your point, kind of more like indoor or finite spaces, exactly for the reasons, complications. So even though you're not necessarily transporting humans, the fact that you're on a main street road can have problematic, and to your point, that inconsistent, incongruent, not federated set of policies or regulation becomes highly problematic when you're trying to have a nationwide rollout. So to your point, you're really focusing on indoor and curbside. Indoor could be shopping malls, indoors could be airports, and then the curbside that you talked about. Now, COVID has also played a very interesting aspect in terms of accelerating the adoption of robotics. in particularly, when you think about social distancing, sanitation, and reducing just the general human interaction instance, how has that accelerated adoption, specifically at the current airport that you guys are operating at, which is Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport?
Yeah, I think we started thinking about delivery robotics before COVID. We were all the co-founders were brainstorming that what needs to be done. But what COVID has done is that the end customer is more receptive towards technology adoption, right? And that's something which we have seen. We don't have to tell someone that this robot is going to deliver something to you. They get it, and that's something which COVID has done to every one of us. So, and it was unfortunate that despite of the last two very, very struggling years for the world, the technology for everyone was not ready, because everybody was, it's pretty much like a Fukushima, when the robots were needed to help every aspect of the nuclear plant, but it was not ready, right? And same happened now that COVID happened, but the delivery robots were talked about, but they were not ready to help. So people are more receptive now. They adopt. They actually anticipate. They don't have any mental framework of the Hollywood robots definition, but they see that this is like daily part of our lives. So now we are live at Cincinnati Airport, and we see a great amount of interaction from people. Specifically, kids love it, and they're using it. Nobody's telling them that what to order, what to do, and how to fetch their items from the robot. They're just getting it by themselves, and that's something which is amazing, to see the users interacting and getting it, that this is a robot, this is for us, and we can use it. And that's another generation.
So I think, just to go a little bit deeper, is in terms of that user experience that you're referring to, which sounds quite intuitive. A part of that, of course, is also this contactless solutions that Autonomy has put in, such as biometric facial scanning and contactless boarding system. But can you walk us through kind of the end-to-end workflow of how it works from somebody ordering something to that actually being delivered to the location of the geolat of the originator?
Yeah. So what we do is, like, any passenger who is at the airport, and after the security check, they are strategically placed standees and on the screens QR codes, which can be scanned by any person, and they get to a web app in which they see all the items which they can order. They select and pay in 2 to 3 clicks, and they only have to enter one detail, which is their departure gate. Now, once we know what the departure gate is, then we give them notifications. The robot gets an order. It goes to a pickup point, which can be a restaurant or a retailer, and the staff puts in the package inside the robot, and the robot goes for delivery to that departure gate. Now, at airport specifically, we have a fixed drop point for each departure gate. And if we look at the airport space in general, it is almost 44,000 airports in the world. They are pretty much similar in nature, right? There are some disparity among them, but still they're similar in the environment per se. So this whole scenario works absolutely well for all the airports. Now, when the robot actually reaches to the endpoint, the customer gets a unique QR code and a notification that, hey, your order has arrived. They show the QR code to the robot, and without touching anything, they grab their packet, and that's it. So we wanted to make sure that we don't enter any passcodes onto a touch screen. It has to be a completely contactless experience. And the reason why people are using it is because after COVID, specifically, people don't want to stand in queues and wait for their orders, right? So first you have to stand in a queue to order, and then you have to wait for your order to get prepped up. So now it's a huge convenience, and there are specific personas of people like gate huggers, which is and the percentage of gate huggers within the airport space has increased massively. So these are the people who actually, after the security check, just go to the departure gate and fly out. So we are just engaging them into the entire ecosystem at the airport, and that's how it is so useful for both the airport and for the passengers.
Now, I think one of the things that you're alluding to is this notion of I think you guys call it digital twin or virtual environment. So effectively, the robot sees a virtual map of that airport, and they understand the context of where the service providers, retailers, food, so forth, the pickup points, but also the specific terminals where they need to drop off as well. And that's really how they're able to navigate about, correct? And if you could talk about also the capabilities like the 2D lasers and some of the cameras and safety sensors.
Yeah, so the robot is capable of perceiving the world in different fidelity of sensors. So we have 3D lidars, which creates a geometric map of the entire area. Then we have 7 to 8 cameras, which gets all the semantic or contextual information around the robot, and we fuse the two in a way that we get a map which is containing high information. For example, we detect that there is a pillar and there is a signboard on it, right? So geometrical structure will always get to know that there is a pillar, and the semantic will identify that there is a signboard which says gate number 14. So those kind of information is something which we capture while making the map. And for the entire airport, it takes like 1.5 days to create the entire digital twin. We just run the robot once and we get all the kind of data, and that helps us to navigate within that pre-mapped area, serviceable area. So this is one of the most important things, because we are not using any beacons, we are not using any reference points or QR codes on the floor to navigate in any area. And the same goes for outdoors as well, and that is one of the major reasons why we do not rely on GPS position to navigate autonomously. And we can do both indoor and outdoor seamlessly.
That's quite interesting about what you're talking about is it's a lack of beacons or geofencing is really what you're referring to, and not using mobile that long is also quite interesting from a coordinate as well, because at some point the customers, while they get accustomed to picking up at a particular designated terminal area, may want to actually have it come directly to where they're sitting as well. But again, you're talking about some of the complications. Now, of course, the benefit of the approach that you're talking about in the context of the airport is that robot's never going to accidentally wander outside of the airport where it's not allowed, for instance. So what are some ways to ensure that both either humans or just maybe trying to maneuver for safety reasons, it has to go outside of a certain boundary, let's say. How does that handle some of those edge cases?
So that's a really good question, because places like airports and even in large retail stores, if the robots are navigating at that point in time, there are certain no-go zones which are annotated while the map creation is happening. So that becomes a boundary that they will never go into that. I'll give you an example that robots are not supposed to go to escalators. So that's a complete no-go zones for the airports, right? And just because of that, the traversable area is defined for the robots. Now they have to make sure that no matter what dynamicity is there around them, they have to navigate from point A to point B in a very swift manner. Now, if it so happens that there are like so many people, and intentionally surrounding the robot and giving it no other way to go about, so then the robot calls for help to the teleoperation, center, where an operator will, after getting the alert, will get into the system and help the robot to come out of the situation.
Understood. Now, over time, I got to believe, especially in an airport, because you're actually collecting so much data, you start to understand the flow of traffic. And certainly, depending on which international airports and the direction, does that mean that these robots can actually start to identify optimal routes? So, for example, closer to the walls, closer to the bathroom side, for example, or away from the bathroom side, versus traversing directly in the middle where you got large crowds of people coming, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that also shifts culturally, right? So if just after CVG International Airport, the next airport which we are doing is Rome International Airport in Europe. So there'll be a cultural difference in how people actually move, whether they are on the left side, on the right side, or they prefer to travel right in the center, right? So those are the things which robot automatically, learns what are the best traversable routes where the robot's performance was best. For example, from a restaurant, if it has to go to gate number 15, and every time when it goes to that direction, if there's a certain route which gives the best optimum time to deliver, then it will automatically learn to make those behaviors. But at the same time, I'll just also want to mention that these are dynamic inputs, right? So at some point in time, it might happen that it is completely, empty, and you can do whatever you want to do. But in crowded areas and certain when the flight is departing, the behavior of the airport will be different. When a flight is coming at the same gate, people flow will be different. So the robot kind of adopts to that particular situation and then reacts. But yes, I mean, airports are very, very fundamentally important to help the robot software to learn from that human behavior, so as to say.
Now, I want to talk about something that's very practical, which is that if you think about an airport or shopping mall, even for that matter, but definitely the airport, because of the dimension of urgency to get to their next flight, to not miss their departure, for instance, is that you have sometimes people that are literally running at a mad pace to get to where they need to go. And sometimes they're not really paying attention, or they don't even care to have proper etiquette, let's say. Plus, you have these go-karts that are transporting people and other things throughout as well that could potentially not see because it is shorter. It's not at a certain height, for instance. How do you ensure that from a commercial rollout, it has the robustness and the ruggedness that I think is critical, that I think it goes beyond just lab and engineering to make sure that it has minimal maintenance and it can address potential damage and repair the fleet of these robots?
That's a very good question. And, so I'll just go back to the journey. So the first pilot which we did at CVG International Airport was December 2020. November, December 2020. And it took 6 months for us to, identify those scenarios where these robots can be deployed for good, right? And those are the things like maintenance. Those are the things like what if, anybody damages the robot by accident. And so those things are already taken care into the product. But, also at the design of the things, like, one of the inputs which we got from a lot of people was that there are a lot of delivery robots which are like below knee height, right? And a place like airport, there are like people are engrossed on their phones, or they're talking to somebody, so they're not paying attention what's happening, below the knee, so the point of tipping over was one of the most rated, answers which we got from a lot of people. And that's why the size of the robot is up to the waist height of a regular person. So it will be difficult for a person to completely miss out and have a collision, so as to say. So those were the design choices which we had. There is a certain safety envelope of the robot which makes sure that it never gets uncomfortably close to any person. And we do have some HRI in place, human robot interaction, using non-verbal signs like lights and screens, and also a verbal feedback so as to communicate with people when they are when everybody is moving around, right? Both people and robots. So those are the steps which we have taken. And when it comes to maintenance, we have somebody on site, which is making sure that the staff at the airport and at the shops is they're not having any issues at all. So that's how we are actually managing the entire operations, so as to say.
Now, when we talk about service robots, and again, we're seeing quite a bit of adoption within restaurants because of the scarcity or the lack of staff, for instance, in certain cases. Aside from the airport context and, let's say, pickup zones, for example, that you're referring, what are other applications or locations that you're looking to expand to?
So, one is like, retail, curbside pickup. Now, last year it grew up to, 700% in the year 2021. And the adoption has been more. So, the curbside pickup has increased massively for retail spaces. So that is one of the use cases, which is of our core focus. Then also the drive-throughs, wherein the curbside deliveries again makes 100% sense, because these drive-throughs were designed almost 35 years back, where the entire process of pick up your food is serial. You have to queue up at a drive-through location, right? So now you can actually order online. You just park your car, and food will come to your parked car. The same goes with the electric cars which are getting charged. So you have to stay at a charging station for like 20 minutes, and you can order food, and the robots can come and deliver to you. So those are the use cases which we are focusing on. We want to leverage the strength of being autonomous both in indoor and outdoor environments, so that those are the white spaces in the industry. Because restaurant serving robots, I think there are a couple of companies which are doing wonderfully well, be it Beer Robotics or Pudu Robotics, and that's not our space, to focus on right now. We are purely focusing around curbside deliveries and indoor deliveries, and extending it to last mile.
Well, I think the only thing that's missing is rollerblades. A bit nostalgic there. I have been joined by Ritukar Vijay, who is the CEO of Ottonomy. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, it was lovely talking to you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.